Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to this podcast in which we delve deep into the bowels of horror from all different decades and all different subgenres. Now, one of the things that we're going to be doing this month, because we made it a special month, is delving into films that are not automatically assumed to be horror films, but they kind of delve into that kind of arena of being horror films, and that is superhero or comic book based movies. Now, I know what you're saying, those are not horror films, but I beg to differ. There are some great comic book horror films out there, or comic book films that have horror elements in it, and those are the type of films that we will be talking about for this month. Now, the one we're talking about tonight is one that's originally steeped in a lot of horror. But we're going to see how watered down the translation has come when we talk about Todd McFarlane's Spawn, starring Michael Jai White. And to talk to you about that movie today, I have brought a special guest with me who loves comic book movies and he loves horror movies, and that is Philip Ray. Thank you, Philip, for joining us on our show today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, so Spawn. First off, I gotta see, because it's a comic book movie. Have you ever read the actual comic book it's based on?
I have not. I have not actually read any of the Spawn comic books. I know they are very wacky and crazy, and I love the design of Spawn, but I've never actually read any of his comics.
Okay, I was going to ask that first because your interpretation or impression of the movie sometimes is dictated by whether or not you like the source material or not. Now, my other question is, have you seen the animated version of this?
I have not. I have seen clips of it, but I've never actually watched the animated series that came out.
Excellent, because the animated series almost is a perfect example of adapting the actual comic book, whereas this film is not. So getting your interpretation of that is going to be interesting, because I have both read the comic book for a long period of time. I haven't read it in over a decade now, but I did start off reading it when it originally was released. And I have seen the animated version, but we're going to be speaking about the movie starring Michael Jai White now. So what was your first impression of watching this movie?
It's bad. It's one of the things that I liked visually Spawn. Again, the movie, when I first saw the movie, like trailers from the movie, I was like, oh, this is interesting because of like, again, I was a young boy, and Spawn's design looked cool, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And watching the movie, I'm like, I like Spawn. I thought the design they ended up going, I think they did a good job adapting his visual and stuff. But then you've got the Violator and everything to do with him with Lake Leguizamo, and then you've got everything else with Martin Sheen's character as well, and yeah, it doesn't work. The flaming butthole effect that they kept going back to and stuff. It's definitely a thing where I know Todd McFarlane's has been trying so hard to do an adaptation again of Spawn, and I think you could do it today, but Spawn is definitely, to do Spawn live action right, 1997 was definitely not the time to do it.
So I'm going to agree and disagree for this. When Spawn originally came out in 97, did you see it when it originally came out, or did you watch it later?
I watched it on TV, like later on when it was on TV and stuff.
Okay, so when I originally saw Spawn at the theater with my whole bunch of friends, Todd McFarlane was still at the top of his popularity in game with the character Spawn. The character Spawn is much more popular now, but when it came out in the 90s was that time of period where everyone was making the most random comic book adapted movies out there for some odd reason. It seemed like there wasn't a Marvel and there wasn't a DC that dominated anything. every comic book that you could, every comic book type you could think of was being made to movies, and it was very random. Spawn was one of those very intriguingly popular yet R-rated comic books that was trying to be adapted for a mainstream audience. And it's very odd to try and do that because he's a hell spawn. So you have to throw in the hell and everything else in there, and you kind of get this weird amalgamation of what Spawn is, what we got, because it wasn't what was in the original comic book. Now, the good thing is, if you read the original comic book, it's fucking boring. It's bland. Don't get me wrong, McFarlane became a better writer as time went on, but the first early year or two of his writing was very bland and boring, and it was moody. And so therefore you would go 10 issues and you'd finally get a really good story after 10 issues. That's kind of hard to whittle down to a 90-minute movie. He was an artist first. He's an artist first, which is why the visuals for Spawn are so fucking amazing. The comic book wise and the movie, the design is amazing. The CGI back then, which in 97, a lot of people thought was cutting edge and cool, is fucking dated now because it was so bad or badly done. It may have looked cool in the big screen in the 90s, but now it just looks really bad computer generated CGI. Which is
well, it's like you had the original, one of the FX artists that was on this was the guy who worked on Jurassic Park, and you look at Jurassic Park visual effects, and that came out 4 years earlier than Spawn, still holds up to this day, versus Spawn, which again, you look at the Violators you look at the Violators final design, and you see all the other Demon's final designs, and it
doesn't hold up. But keeping in mind that when there's a difference between Spielberg and what the heck is the director's name for this one? He's someone.
It's Mark A.Z. Dippy. It was it was basically his director debut.
Yeah. So keep in mind that when this was made, you got Michael J. White, who was an up-and-coming martial arts actor, but you got Martin Sheen and John Leguizamo in this movie, and Melinda Clark, who is making a name for herself, as was Teresa Randall. So and D.B. Sweeney. So the thing is that you had a really good cast for what at the time was thought to be a really good idea to make a mainstream version of Spawn for everyone to enjoy. I think what happens is that there was no very popular comic book superhero at the time that could have taken them out, because I think we were several years before the X-Men movies would come out, but we were right around when I think the first or second Blade was coming out. So you were good with doing those darker heroes, but they were all done on a budget. I think I would not be surprised if Martin Sheen got the most money of anyone in this film. And of course, he's hamming it up in this movie. I mean, this is Martin Sheen, for crying out loud. He's probably, he's hamming it up in this movie.
Well, Leguizamo's the hammiest of hams in the movie. In the end.
Yeah, but the thing is that the way he plays the Violator is pretty much how the Violator is in the comic book. The Violator is one of the more interesting characters in the comic book. And the whole Malbolgi looks horrible. He looked horrible in 97 when I saw the movie in 97. I thought Malbolgi looked horrible too. Big giant monster, mouth never moves, but he talks. It looks bad. It did not age well because it was bad then. Everything in Hell looks crap. Every time they showed all the Hell Spawn, it looked like junk back in 97. It still looks horrible. But for all of those comic book geeks who didn't have a Marvel or DC dominating, this was one of those films that was popular because it was just one of the few out there. I mean, there's a reason why the Blade movies took off like gangbusters. no one had seen a superhero fucking movie in a while. You know, you had Batman occasionally starring a different actor every other movie. But really, that's about all you had. You know? You look at you about to say something.
No, continue.
um, the thing was, for me, even though I didn't care for the movie when it first came out, it's a movie I did see several times because when I was watching the movie with friends, we were all at that age where no matter how bad the CGI was, we still thought it was cool to see fucking Spawn as a character. I kind of see that now with all the geeks out there who love seeing the Avengers in a movie now, where they just geek out whether the movie is any good or not. Because you know my opinions of most of the Marvel movies. I grew up in the earlier generation than most of the current generation did, and what I see on the screen with the Avengers is but my brother, who's older than me, absolutely loves seeing these comic book characters on the big screen. No matter if he read the comic books or not. Like, that's why I wanted to get your opinions on what you thought about the movie, because you never read the comic books and you never saw the original animated show. I think Spawn always worked better as an animated. What they did, what McFarlane created in the comic book, could easily be translated in the animated form. And that's what HBO did when they produced the Spawn animated show. It was R-rated cartoon. It was bloody. It was gory. It was exactly what people who liked the original comic book wanted, and they got it. And then the film the film is a film.
Yeah, the problem with the film is the thing with Spawn is that because again, like he's I mean, it's hard. He's got the cape. He's got again his whole costume. He's not a character that is so easily. Again, the things he fights is mostly demons, so it's not something where you can use practical all the time. He is a kind of like more animated to a point kind of superhero. So it's harder to do. It's like the difference of like, let's say Batman versus Martian Manhunter. I'm like, Batman, I mean, you can throw any actor in a suit that costume he makes and you can make a movie. Martian Manhunter, it's like there's going to be some CGI. There's going to be some heavy CGI to be able to do the character. And that's the thing with Spawn is that it's the same. The problem is that it was very ambitious for its time because, again, of everything it was trying to do visually, that unfortunately CGI just wasn't there enough to make it not, like, again, make it not timeless. Again, like, yeah, Mela Bogey, how do you say his name?
Alboji.
Mel Bulgy. Yeah, his everything with him is infamous about when you think about the movie, you think of him, and then you think of the Violator. But I will say, going to the Violator, that looked good too. Like the costume designs for Spawn, and when John Leguizamo the clown, did a great job. Like they nailed that stuff out of the park. I think seeing what the designs were in the comics, it was almost a straight for straight ripoff, or adaptation of it. But once they could, but yeah, when they relied on like practical stuff, it looks good. But when it's stuff where they rely purely on the CGI, that's when it gets a little iffy.
Yeah. Oh no, I won't disagree with you. I think though at that time, that time period, everyone and this is part of Jurassic Park's fault. Jurassic Park came out and Spielberg had the money and the clout to be able to meld practical effects with CGI effects, with animatronics, with everything, and build upon a world in which people had never seen, and it looked realistic from beginning to end. Well, everyone else wanted that too. They wanted to use CGI to do everything, and so that's what they did. And I don't think the end result, even for '97, was what was expected. It's just what they could do.
Well, I think even at that time in the 90s is when people started to experiment more with CG, started going on CGI more. It's just the problem is a lot of it didn't really look bad. Like look at the Lawnmower Man that came out a year before Jurassic Park, and again, that's another infamous like CGI trying to be very ambitious. CGI looked terrible for it. But
Well,
again, it's the 90s is when it started to be the experimental where they're like, the computers were starting to get, a little smaller and people were like, "Oh, let's try to do this." I mean, you had Toy Story, one of the first like fully CG animated films that came out in 1995. That came out a year uh after Jurassic Park and stuff, and that came out 2 years before Spawn, and again, like some of that stuff holds up. A lot of the humans look terrible in that movie, and you watch it now, and you're like, but back at the time, like that, everyone was trying to make this work because before then it was harder to get the aspects of using CG. But in the 90s, people were getting experimental with CG, seeing how much they could push, and sometimes it looked great, and then sometimes it looked terrible.
which is always funny to me because your visual special effects are only as good as the team behind you. And as much as I love the fact that K and B did the makeup effects, I don't know how much, if any, they had to deal with any of the virtual uh, visual effects. But the makeup effects, when it comes to, like you said, Violator and Spawn, when he's the burns and everything like that, looks great. And that's what K and B did back then. They did that amazingly. But the visual effects are a completely different thing. I think what K and B did actually saves a lot of the movie.
Yes.
It could have been completely hokey and horrible. I mean, like you bring up the Lawnmower Man, which I still absolutely love that movie. One day I'll talk about that movie, but I absolutely love that movie. But the CGI was something no one had ever done. Brett Leonard had, I think that's the director's name. Brett Leonard was doing stuff that no one else was doing back then. And of course, now it looks dated and pretty bad. But everyone in the 90s was trying to do something new. CGI was a new toy. So let's do everything in CGI, no matter how bad or accomplished it was. But they didn't all have the money like Spielberg. Like I go back to, James Cameron, whose own company did T2, which came out the early 90s. And that shit still holds up extremely well. And there's a lot of visual effects in that movie. But going back to Spawn, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like it now is because of the CGI. It looks bad. It was dated. And no matter how good the story was, and the story is convoluted. Don't get me wrong. The story is freaking convoluted. If you're not a fan of the comic book, I would love to know how much of the story you actually get and how much just goes right over your head and you have no idea what the fuck's going on. Because
I mean, there's so much exposition at the beginning of the movie that they had to like they they had to make sure at the beginning of the movie they're like, listen, here's all the things that's going on, so you know what the hell's going on. And even then it's a little still a little convoluted to a point.
it's a bit more convoluted than it ever needs to be. I mean, you essentially you have a devil who wants someone to lead his army to invade heaven, but he's using this politician who runs a company who does bioweapons to, I guess, I don't know why this guy even wants to, who could possibly take over the entire world with the bioweapons, which right there sounds something like this out of James Bond. But then he's working with the devil. But then the devil is using his henchmen to actually try and kill him to jumpstart the Armageddon, and then have that guy become his leader of his army to go into heaven. But it's like, dude, this is the devil working against the devil's own interests. What the? It's one of those plot things that makes no sense because there is no agent of heaven in this war. It is an agent of hell, Spawn, who is trying to thwart another agent of hell, which is Martin Sheen. The plot makes no sense. I tried to make sense of it again when I rewatched the movie, and it still makes no sense. It's a dumb plot, and I can't remember if this was part of the plot problems I had with the original Spawn comic book because it was dull. The first 15 issues of Spawn, you'd have an issue here or there that was pretty damn good, and then you'd have a lot of dull shit. But it was visually cool. It was visually cool. So for you, how much of that is like Gus says whoosh, goes over your head and you don't care, or it doesn't explain it, or it's over explained?
Well, it's just like, it's yeah, it's just like because the movie starts out once you get past the exposition, which that's the other problem with the story was if the exposition's so nonsensical because it starts that out. You get all this exposition about hell, and you're looking at the flaming butthole, and it's talking about demons and angels, and then it cuts, and then we get to the beginning where it starts out like a stereotypical action movie.
Yes.
Like, and there's no connection. Like, eventually you'll kind of see like, oh, okay, like it's like you get where it's coming from, but it's not like something like, let's say, Star Wars, when you have the title crawl and stuff, and it's explaining the world, so you get an idea what the world is. No, for this movie, when it does that, it's just throwing stuff at you that it's like a test later. It was like, wait, hold on, is this gonna be relevant? Because then it's like you see, it's like open the book and you're seeing stuff about like math, and then you go to page 3, and then suddenly you're reading about history, and you're like, whoa, where did these two don't match? And then eventually you get to page 56, and then now it's back to math, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's how it connected. Like it doesn't from the get-go it tries to do too much. Like honestly, I think when they do adapt Spawn again, I think that one of the biggest things, and this might be and this is me not we may disagree with this. I think you should not have the Violator be your first villain. And the reason why is because I think the Violator himself is such a he is such a wacky character, but and that's the problem with the movie is that tonally, like John Leguizamo, he's putting his all into the movie, but his scenes, and then you take his scenes away, and then you got the Martin Sheen scenes, and you've got the Spawn scenes, and they don't mesh well. Because John Leguizamo, he's going full comedy here, and I know that's the point of the character, from my understanding. But it's like his scenes with Spawn do not feel totally the same as Martin Sheen stuff with Spawn, because again, you get the Martin Sheen stuff where again it's a revenge flick. He's after him, he betrayed him. It's the stereotypical like revenge flick, but then you've got John Leguizamo dressed up as a schoolgirl, doing weird things and like basically being the Mask essentially, and it just does not. The one side's too serious to make the other side too goofy and stuff.
Yeah, and that's you say that, and you're absolutely right, and that's one of the things that made the comic so odd. Is the differences between the Spawn character, who was like completely dead serious in the comic book, versus the Violator, who's like, I'm an agent from hell. I can do whatever I want to because I have these powers. I can beat your ass too, Spawn. I said, but you're right. John Leguizamo did a good job of portraying the character, but it does feel like a different movie. It feels like I think a good way to remake this would be exactly the way that they remade the Mortal Kombat movie. They don't go to the tournament in the first fucking movie. It is all a setup for the tournament. Whereas the original movie did everything in the tournament in the first movie. The Mortal Kombat movie did the fucking setting the world up and setting the main characters up, and then they don't even get to the tournament by the end of the movie. It's not that the tournament for the first Mortal Kombat movie is not that important. I think you're right in that the remake of this should focus on the Spawn character and not the Violator character because he's such an over the top character. It's kind of like what Christopher Nolan did by not putting Joker in the first Batman movie is. You know, he's fighting the Scarecrow, which is a much more Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul, who are much more level-headed, more like he is, than the Joker character, who is so far different than the Batman character. I think you're right. I think if they were, and that could be why McFarlane is having such a hard time writing the script. Heard the script was astronomically long, his first draft, and he's trying to whittle it down because I think, like I said, the way he wrote the original comic book, it was long and drawn out. And he was like, I'm just not going to tell you a whole lot about why Spawn's here, any of that shit, for like the first 20 issues. Yeah, you got all this great ideas, but you're just parceling them out so slowly in the comic book. I stopped reading the fucking comic book after about 2.5 years. I heard that it got much better by issue 100, and it's still going strong. So, and there was lots of, and you know, with a comic book, you can go that long, you keep expanding, and with the people that have now read it and how long it's been out now, because it's still going on right now, you have a lot more stuff to pull upon to make a good movie. Whereas when this movie came out, I'd have to look at the date when how long Spawn the comic book had been out.
So Spawn started, the first Spawn story was written in 1992. So this movie, essentially, there would have been 5 years of issues to pull from.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because Spawn was really slow coming out. Anyone who remembers this, McFarlane could not keep on the schedule correctly. This is why it was so tough to keep collecting it early on. He was so fucking slow with putting out issues. I think Greg Capullo eventually took over drawing it because he was so fucking slow drawing it. That's not to say that anything's wrong with it. Anyone who's ever seen Todd McFarlane's artwork is fucking amazing. I started reading a lot of different Spider-Man comics because he fucking drew them. He's a master at drawing shit and creating action figures. Anyone who likes horror action figures, you know, he did all the best ones. But Spawn is like this horror, and this is probably where he gets a lot of his horror themes from. He loves, Spawn's a horror comic book. It's serial killers, hell Spawn. It's steeped in horror elements, which is another thing that, you know, in the 97 was kind of hard to sell. So you had to water it down. I mean, I'm not gonna say anything. You know, I'm glad we got Spawn the movie when it came out in 97. I think that the people were bold to try and do a movie like this, but like I said, in the 90s, they were throwing everything at the fucking dartboard and hoping something would stick with audiences. And the movie did not do bad.
Yeah, it was a financial success.
Yeah, because I remember McFarlane wanting to do a sequel that was closer to his comic book because there was so much criticism on how much it deviated from it. And then he just never did a sequel. And then he's been talking about this new version for like 3 decades.
Yeah, like right now, Jamie Foxx has been linked to be Spawn, be the next Spawn, and I think that's a good casting and stuff. Like, we didn't talk about it too much, but I mean, Michael Jai White, I thought he was a fine choice for Spawn back in the day. I thought he did a fine job, and so yeah, I mean, Jamie Foxx, I mean, I think that's a good casting choice. I like Jamie Foxx as an actor. I think he will do well. I think he would do well.
Well, yeah, I had not brought Michael J. White's name up because when I saw him in this movie, I didn't know who he was, and I absolutely hated him in this movie. Hated
Really?
him in this movie in '97 when this movie came out. Michael J. White has since grown on me. I have seen a lot more of his films. But when this film came out, for some odd reason, I absolutely hated him, and that could have colored my opinions on it then. Although I still don't think the movie's highly, I don't really regard the movie highly now either. But my opinions on Michael J. White now are not nearly as bad as they were when the movie originally came out. I think he's he's a martial artist who wants to be an actor, but I don't think he was ever given like good training to be a good actor. I think he wanted to be something like Stallone. Like Stallone was not what someone I look at as a good actor, but he just happens to be in roles that fit his personality and they work. Because when you watch a Stallone movie and it doesn't work, you realize it doesn't fucking work. Michael J. White is that way. Michael J. White is in some movies he's really fucking good in. And in other movies, like Universal Soldier, The Return, he's god awful in. It's like you need a director who can direct you, Michael J. White. I was like, oh my god. But Black Dynamite, some of the stuff he's done, he's absolutely brilliant in. But Spawn, I think his performance gets colored by the fact that he's playing Spawn. I think someone like Jamie Lee Foxx could come in and still be Jamie Lee Foxx, but Michael J. White didn't have a name when he did this movie. I can't actually recall what movies he did before this one to even warrant him getting the role of Spawn.
The biggest thing he did before was he was Mike Tyson for the Tyson movie. For the biopic.
The one that's just called Tyson?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. I've seen that movie, but I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, he had small roles and stuff.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. Like I said, I think John Leguizamo and Martin Sheen were better known actors than he was. And then Melinda Clarke, I can't remember what came first between the infamous Return of the Living Dead 3 and some of the other films she was in before this.
Because those all happened before.
Okay. And then, of course, what was the other actor I was thinking of? D.B. Sweeney, which they changed they colorblind cast him in a role that was originally an African American in the comic book, probably because he was a better known actor than some of the other people out there.
Actually, that wasn't the reason. The reason is what you expect. They changed his race because basically the studio was not confident on having too many black leads at the time.
Yeah. Oh no.
And the studio was afraid that by having too many black leads that the films that people would think, the journalists would think that it would be just only a African American movie and not for like everyone. Yeah. And so that's why they casted Terry instead, or not Terry.
B.B. Sweeney.
B.B. Sweeney.
Yeah, because he's a young guy who was coming off of like Cutting Edge and Fire in the Sky and a shit ton of other movies. So Martin, yeah, because essentially the characters in the McFarlane comic book that are Caucasian are the characters they don't actually stick in this movie. But there are some really great characters that McFarlane has created for the Spawn universe. Which if I was him, if I was ambitious, Mr. Todd McFarlane, if you're listening to this, you should just create your own Spawn universe. The Spawn universe is such a vastly, incredibly cool universe with all the different types of characters. You could do your own Marvel Cinematic Universe, but if he was smart, he would get Netflix to back it. Or
Well, what's funny is one of the ideas for the Spawn sequel was going to be, it was basically going to be a Sam and Twitch movie,
yeah,
and Spawn was going to be a background character in it because Sam and Twitch make an appearance in this movie, but like they're basically silent, like stand-ins, like they're just cameos and stuff.
yeah, those two characters are amazing in the comic book. I would love to see them as this, in their own television series, a limited series or something. Like I said, the Spawn universe, it has a lot. Like the Spawn has been around a long time now. There is a universe of different types of things you could do. It would be amazing if someone picked it up and saw the potential of it. Back when this movie came out, there was, we were simply trying to emulate stuff like Blade and The Crow, all in, smaller budget movies that yielded profits. But they were not like, they weren't expensive. They were lower end films. You know, that's one of the things I pick up on because I think I saw all of these movies at the theater when it was coming out because back then I was still a comic book geek, um, and so back then when I was growing up, that's what I had for my films: Spawn, The Crow, the Blade movies. I had those movies to watch, whereas the kids nowadays are watching all of the Spider-Mans, the Avengers, the stuff that I could only read and dream about them making movies about. So I
Yeah.
was used to being limited on what I could see back then.
Oh yeah, before now it's interesting because we're seeing that, but it's funny because we're seeing that now a little bit. But yeah, back in the day, DC, DC was the only prime, like really kind of making successful movies. Marvel really wasn't doing well, and so Spawn is from Image and stuff, and uh that was really the only Image comic book adaptation really around that time and stuff. And we got The Crow and stuff, but nowadays it's interesting seeing we're now getting all of the different we're getting finally some of these adaptations we never thought we'd see, like The Sandman on Netflix. um Unfortunately, The Crow got remade again. Even that had a couple sequels too, but uh
Invincible. I never thought Invincible would be
yeah,
made to a fucking television series, but that's an animated television series, gory as shit.
yeah.
Stuff like that. You know,
Invincible, Kick-Ass had two movies. The Walking Dead became such a phenomenon and got a billion sequels. And now is the time. The Boys, uh, like we're seeing today. It's funny now we're seeing this renaissance of all these. Not even just again, it's not just only Marvel and DC, but all these others. So it's funny that it's taken Spawn so long to come back in the limelight. But I think you are correct. Is I think Todd McFarlane, unfortunately, is in a sense he's holding Spawn back to a point because he's being so particular on it that I think I'm curious if we ever get this adaptation, because it's been in development hell for so long. But I'm like curious what the end result will be because there are some times when you have because I think they're going to direct it himself and stuff. Hopefully we don't get another like Stephen King situation with uh but I think he's getting so nitpicky that he's kind of preventing Spawn to become bigger.
I think the reason mainly because he holds the rights to any other film version of it. Because
Yeah.
he's smart, he's savvy. So I'm not because he was a producer on this movie. So I would not hesitate to imagine that he holds the rights, and that's why no one has bothered to make a sequel after sequel of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And because he's very, he definitely seems like he's very hands-on. Like I know with this, he basically was uh there was a lot of like even when this movie was being made, he was originally it was going to get made by Columbia Pictures, but Todd McFarlane said no because he felt he was not given enough creative control over the movie, which is why he ended up getting to New Line Cinema, which is funny because allegedly he sold the film rights for $1 in exchange for having complete creative input on the film.
Yeah.
So, which I mean, to a point, you got to respect the man for, wanting to make sure what his product is done right. But at the same time, I do think, and like you said, maybe hopefully now he's learned his lessons, but I definitely think you do need some level of. I definitely think with the story of Spawn, I think there has to be some kind of simplification for a general audience, for something like that to really, really become popular and stuff. Because back in the day, I think Spawn was very popular when it first came out. But nowadays, I would not say Spawn is nowhere close. I know Todd McFarlane wants Spawn to, he said in the past, he wants Spawn to outlive like characters like Superman and Spider-Man. And it's like, that's never going to happen right now with the way, unless like, more stuff becomes more mainstream with it.
You know what? I think for the longest time, I don't think it's true now, but I don't keep track of these records anymore. For the longest time, Spawn held the most popular and most run or sales for best selling comic book for the longest fucking time. I think stuff like I think Kurtzman outdid him with for maybe a little bit with Walking Dead, but of course Walking Dead is also an Image Skybound production, so it's still part of Image. But that's the reason why it's one of the longest running comic books out right now. They still run that shit. I mean, I can't remember what issue they're on now, but it's fucking still running because it's still hugely popular, and the action figures keep it in line. But you're right. I think the lack of ancillary markets, like there's no Spawn video game out there that's there. I mean, there's no new animated shows, or there's no. I mean, you're right. I think if you want Spawn to be that popular, you have to keep creating stuff. Who knows how many? They keep redoing fucking Spider-Man cartoons. Like one ends and they do another one. Batman cartoons. They got Lego Batman cartoons, regular Batman cartoons. Let's make a sequel to another cartoon. These things don't ever die. Spawn needs to keep producing stuff. I think it could be. But in this day and age now, with audiences being so fickle, I'd be surprised to know how many people actually still remember this film. I think most people are more probably know the story of how long it's taken McFarlane to create the new Spawn than they realize that there was an old Spawn.
Yeah, the last time Spawn has recently came into like the mainstream was he was a playable character in not the current Mortal Kombat, but the one that came out before that in 2019. He was a playable character, and that was probably the last time. Well, also he was a costume for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 as well. So like those were the last time that Spawn has became part relevant to the mainstream audience. But other than that, yeah, he's and I can tell you, especially for Call of Duty, there were probably a lot of kids going like, I don't know who this thing is. I mean, he looks cool, but I don't know who this guy is.
Oh, Jesus. So you're trying to tell me that Bruce Campbell in the Army of Darkness is more popular than fucking Spawn?
Because we've gotten, hell, we got the TV show. We've had...
Well, you have several video games. They keep coming back.
Several video games.
Oh my God! They keep reproducing the DVD. It's one of the most reproduced movies out there. They've produced new versions of Army of Darkness more than any other movie in the history of movies now. For a movie that tanked at the box office, by the way. But yeah. But we don't want to get too far off subject. Any last words about Spawn?
Again, it's a very much a product of its time. I can't really recommend anyone to see it nowadays. I think again, the things that people remember about this movie is John Leguizamo, and again, and the design of Spawn, like the accuracy with the costuming for Spawn. I think people will. I think that's one of the remembered parts. But it's really a product of its time, and it should get adapted again. And whenever we get this new one, hopefully it'll be better, hopefully. But yeah, it's definitely a Spawn's definitely the 1997. It's definitely was a product of its time that's not really going to be looked on fondly. For some people, it might be a cult classics, but for a lot of people, it was meh.
I don't think this will ever be a cult classic. This is be as classic as, and I hate to say this about Ang Lee because I love his movies. Ang Lee's Hulk. No one fucking remembers Ang Lee's Hulk. Ang Lee probably doesn't remember Ang Lee's Hulk.
Hey, you still remember about the Hulk Doodles? I remember the Hulk Doodles.
But the thing about Spawn is this is so much a product of his time, and the only people who really will remember this are people like me who grew up with it. Like, people aren't searching for this movie out there that I've ever been aware of. I mean, it was popular when it came out, but because there was no sequels to keep up that momentum, it kind of quickly came and went and died, and it's not even a cult movie. It's just a forgotten movie. And because of the way that McFarlane has talked up his new movie for so long, and his dismay with his own movie, the '97 one, that people just kind of look it off. It's like no one remembers Shaquille O'Neal and Steel. Steel is a completely forgotten movie. No one cares. No one remembers. No one's ever going to remember. It's not a cult movie. It's not a cult movie like the movie Tank Girl is a cult movie. It's a hugely popular movie with the LGBTQ community. It's a hugely popular film for people who just wanted something different when that came out. That was another movie that tanked the box office that found an audience later on. Now it's much more highly thought about because of what they did in that movie, because it was so much like the comic book, which is also a crazy fucking independent comic book. I think it's from Dark Horse, actually. But still one of the smaller publishers out there, just like Spawn is from Image. But this one, CGI was pretty bad. It was bad then, it's bad now. There's so much wrong with the movie that people have noticed, and they keep noticing, and they keep talking about, that it turns people away. Now, that's not our job here at Conversation Horror. We want to turn people towards some of these movies, but by saying that, the things that turn people away, the thing I will get people to think about it is the fact that John Leguizamo, who we have talked about, is amazing in his role as the clown part of the Violator. I think Michael Jai White, after seeing all of his other movies, and I've seen a lot of his movies now, I may have hated him when I first saw this film, but if you want to see him in one of his stronger films, this is one of his stronger films. No doubt about it. He's given much more to do in this film because he's the star of this film. Now, Michael Sheen is just Michael Sheen. He's hamming it up like he did in The Dead Zone. This is not The West Wing. He's hamming it up like he did in The Dead Zone. All right. But is there any qualities that make this a movie worth watching? If you want to watch the '90s superhero movies, you can go back and watch things like The Punisher. If we don't consider these great movies, they're a product of their time. We all know that. The '90s was a time for experimentation, and that's what this was. It was an experiment. It was an experiment that most people that was succeeded monetarily, but not critically or popularity wise. But we have it, we talked about it, and that's what we do here at Conversations in Horror. So one of the last things I want to ask you, Mr. Philip, is what do you rate this film from a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being poor, 5 being great. I really want to know what you say about this one.
It is a 1.5.
1.5, okay. You know what? I'm gonna go the same route. It was a 1 for me for the longest time, but I rewatched it. When I rewatched it, and the problem is that every one of the problems I had with the film originally in '97 are still there. The only difference is that I don't think Michael J. White was extremely horrible in the movie anymore. So I elevated it from a 1 to 1.5. I used to think he was god awful, and I just think I just had a bad like mental thing with Michael J. White when this movie came out. I just hated it. But everything else is, I can look at the movie now and say that K&B did some amazing practical effects. The effects look great in this movie. The visual effects, they're poor. They're horrible. Early computer CGI. But you watch any of the movies early CGI, you're going to see these problems. With that, I want to thank you, Philip, for joining me on this conversation of horror, in which we talked about the movie Spawn. For everyone else out there, I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. We will have more conversations about comic book horror movies, we hope you stick around for the rest of the month. By all means, make sure to check out all of our previous episodes and make sure to like, follow, and do that thing you do with your favorite podcast so you never miss an episode, because we come out every Wednesday at 8 a.m. for our regular episodes, and then these special episodes come out every Monday at 8 a.m. So you get, for the time being, you get some double dose of conversations of horror in the month. With that, I want to thank you, and everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment wants to thank you for joining us. Everyone out there, have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.